Welcome traders to today's trading room here, or actually trading strategy webinar to be precise. Thanks for joining us. We're going to take a look at the same strategy that we've looked at the last 2 weeks, I think, or the third or fourth week now in the meantime. So what that strategy is, we'll be discussing in this PowerPoint, and then we'll take a look at the live charts, of course, and the platform. So first of all, this PowerPoint, though explaining the disclaimer, for instance, this online material here, educational material, is developed by Admiral Markets Estonia for a global audience. Please take into consideration that the info in this session may not be suitable for everyone. To get the corresponding information on charting, conditions, and any other details, please visit admiralmarketsglobal.com, select your country of residence, and contact an appropriate entity. Then, risk disclaimer explaining that trading for exchange and global financial markets is considered high risk and may not be suitable for all investors. Please seek the advice of an independent financial advisor for more information on that. And this webinar is for educational purposes only. By continuing watching this webinar, you agree with the disclaimer and the content mentioned here. Thank you for your attention. So we'll be looking at these steps as well, but this time we'll be focusing on moving averages, as you might know. We'll be using moving averages and pivot points and candlestick patterns primarily, and we will be using those methods to define the trend, search for opportunities, check for filters, establish the trigger, and decide about entry methods that I will use for myself. The trend in this particular strategy is used by the 21 and 34. You may actually switch to the 13 and 34. Let me correct that right away. In the meantime, on the hourly, same direction here on 1 hour chart. So when those two are aligned basically and are also pointed in the same direction, then we have a trend. When they're in the same direction, that's the trend. Specifically, if they're aligned to one direction, that is the opportunity. Then we have filters. Potential filters could be, for instance, news events, when price is still contained within the Camarilla L3 and H3 levels, when you have daily highs or lows, tops or bottoms, pivot points close by, and divergence. Those are things that could stop a trade from taking place, but doesn't always have to be, but those are potential filters. Trigger would be when price clears through support and resistance, thereby creating sufficient space and currency correlations. Entry could be the break of the fractal or retest after the break. Yesterday we discussed, I discussed volatility, and we also discussed break, pullback, continue concept shortly. Trade management could be the bottoms or candlestick lows, a trail stop loss by, for instance, 6 pips. Alrighty, make sure to take a look at Admiral Markets in the social media. And with that said, let me grab the calendar here. 1 second, folks. There, we got it. Today, we got ADP going on. We got, first of all, pound services PMI in 1 hour 40 from now. We have all kind of PMIs, in fact, on the Eurozone, Italian, French. Let's hope we don't get that many revisions of the PMI like last time. Maybe this time it will be more consistent. But we have a lot of PMIs on the European zone and pound coming up. We have also the ADP, ISM PMI on the dollar, so that's all today. Tomorrow, I do believe we have euro interest rate and pound interest rate, and Friday, I know for sure we have NFP, but I want to check and double check the interest rate. Yes, euro interest rate decision, pound interest rate decision. Indeed. Goody good. So with that said, let's head over to the chart and take a look at the strategy. So let's start with the euro dollar, as always, 1 hour chart first of all, to see if we have any momentum. And we do have some down momentum. We had a spike up yesterday. That was possible, but that was something that didn't have much space, we said. Sorry, I realized that actually my screen was frozen. Sorry about that. Yeah, thanks, Predak. Sorry about that. I'm not sure what we missed. I was just showing the risk calendar, so it's not not a biggie. I think not much regarding the PowerPoint. I'm not sure exactly what you missed, but basically it's all about trade management, entry here, trigger, filters, opportunity, trend. Oh, alrighty. So with that said, yeah, yesterday we had the upside correction, as we were saying, that could happen, but unfortunately price was having not enough space for that upside. That was the problem, so we skipped, or I skipped that in any case, although I realized that there was a chance that that could happen. Now I'm just opening my drawing tool, so that's why I'm a bit slowing down, but basically we did have that resistance shooting star here at the H3, or not, that was actually yesterday, so not sure about that, but at this resistance, that was one of those key things you could look for downside when price does make a retracement close to resistance, and that's indeed what happened. So maybe the downside would have been interesting. The upside had limited space. It did break out pretty strongly, then found that resistance obviously at that level, and price then started to move down and down and down, and we're still in that downfall. So the moving averages, though, on the hourly are not yet aligned. That's the thing. Otherwise, it's definitely looking bearish. We have all the pivot points basically above us. So in that regard, we have things bearishly set up, but not yet aligned. So something, for instance, if price were to hook back to the weekly, I'm not sure if it can get that high, but or the daily, let's say, and show a rejection candle at the daily pivot, that would be another way of trading it to the downside. So in that regard, there's nothing to do on this hourly. If you look at the 50-minute chart, we do have a bearish alignment, but I prefer to have both of them aligned, the hourly and 15, because it does give a stronger signal. So let's continue hunting and see if there's a situation, a pair that does have the hourly and 50-minute aligned. Doesn't necessarily have to be so. Here you have the 15-minute in the downtrend. You have a L3 acting as support, so the break below this could be a breakout trade. But we have a lot of space here potentially. But I like it when both are aligned, and I prefer to focus on those. I like it, the euro dollar I like more if it were to make a retracement back to the pivot for reaction, candlestick pattern on the hourly chart for downside. That would make sense. Alrighty, this is pound dollar. So basically here we see downtrend on the hourly, big downtrend in fact, big wide open gap right here, 50-minute chart between those moving averages, same thing. L4 has been broken, which means we have some good downside expectations. The ATR is showing a projection low here of 166.86. So we got plenty of space, I would say, for further falls. All the pivot points are behind us or above us, so that's looking pretty good. So, just because we're moving down now doesn't have to mean that we continue moving down. We could get a retracement. That's something we have to be aware of. Especially if you look at the fact that the pound dollar has been in a downtrend already since here. If we then zoom into the 5-minute chart, one second. My computer is slowing down a bit. Hang on. There it is. Yeah, considering the fact that we've been in this downtrend already for a while, you can see the 5-minute breaks doing well, although I wouldn't take them in Asian session. I don't trade it. But surprisingly, Asian session having a very, very trending mode on this pound dollar. I mean, the fact that it started all the way here, and before London starts, it's actually all the way here. That basically means it moved down 40 pips. That's quite a lot for a pound dollar to move during the Asian session. So I'm not too keen on taking the break right here, right now. I think a retracement is more likely, but downside certainly makes sense. And I would like to see downside commence, but not from here. Later in the day, maybe an hour or two after it makes a retracement, downside like that does make sense. If it hooks back to the L3 long, for instance, and finds resistance, that makes more sense to me. Oh, we have Adrian is saying we have a press conference on the euro. It doesn't show up here, that's why I didn't know about it, but that's good to know. So be careful of that. Unless, Adrian, are you sure it's today? Because there's a press conference tomorrow on Thursday. Maybe that's what you mean, right? Maybe the Thursday one. Okay, yeah. Yeah, it's possible. Even today, we could have a quietness, even though the press conference is tomorrow. That's true. You never know. And it's been quite rangy. So in that regard, it's good to skip it. Also, the moving averages are not aligned, so that's a very strict, well, not very strict, but it is my preference, at least, to have those aligned. So makes sense. Yeah, interest rate decisions are always good to be aware of and avoid. So most of the time, I don't trade on the interest rate days for that pair. If it's the euro and pound, usually I'm careful on every position. And also NFP I avoid. This one could be even extra special indeed, especially because of the quantitative easing that might commence a bit stronger finally. That's the question. That'll be very interesting to find that answer. And we'll have to see if we get some quantitative easing, a lot of quantitative easing, maybe just a bit now and a few months later a bit more. Be interesting to see indeed, definitely. The pound dollar, so I would rather wait a bit for the pound dollar basically. We already see some upside momentum here coming in. And the hourly is starting to look suspiciously like a pin bar here, or at least a big wick on the hourly. Price action was very bearish, but I already had a lot of bearish candles in a row. So to me, that is signaling a potential, well, we have to see. If price is able to break above these tops here, then it's probably going to make a bigger retracement. However, because it already moved that much, I wouldn't expect too many candles still down. You never know. It could be more than I think, but I'd rather see and wait for a retracement and see if there's something else going on. The audio was a good trade from the shooting star down. If you trail stop the candle highs, you would have gotten out after the spin bar, or if you don't, even if you saw the pin bar, it would be a good time to exit. Catching about 30 pips versus, well, the risk is about 10, isn't it? So that's a good 3-to-1 trade roughly. So that's good. Did anyone take that out USD or catch it? Roughly 3-to-1 was the setup there, so that's good. 3 units of reward. Small move down, but still 3-to-1 because of the tight stop loss above the shooting star. By the way, there are some people I promised an email to write an email yesterday. I haven't had the time, unfortunately, to do so, but I will very soon send that email. I hope today, but for sure by tomorrow. So that was a good trade. Now the odd USD actually has bullish aligned candlesticks, but is between the daily and weekly and the monthly pretty close. So to me, this had a formation that's interesting. Bullish moving averages, but price very close to key levels. No space to the upside, and price is moving up, not down at the moment due to this big candle here. So no, that doesn't look that interesting at the moment. Very simple, sweet and simple. Kiwi. I was trading the Kiwi. That's why I put the parabolic on. Yesterday I shorted it. It was at a rejection bar, basically at, where was it? Here. These two at a daily pivot. So I shorted it upon the close of this one, and it retraced part of that candle, as you can see, but then fell as a stone. So that was good. Yeah, sure thing, Vigantas. I actually promised others to send it. I just really didn't have time yesterday, unfortunately, but I hope today or otherwise tomorrow. Just send me an email to that address. So that was a trade I made nice profit on, the Kiwi here, to the downside. Still in the downtrend, in fact. Very wide moving averages, pivots above it. So definitely in a downtrend. Broke through L3 already. Definitely looking different in the Kiwi. Than the odd USD, sorry. Getting them mixed up. The 50-minute chart also in the downtrend, definitely. Trying to poke through the L3. Looks like a bit of loss, the bulls lost control a bit with this wick at the bottom here. Relatively quite a big wick compared to the candle, plus we have already had several bearish candles in a row. So unfortunately we're seeing, I think, a bit of the tail end of the Asian session, which had downside, but if the London will get that automatically is the question, because we could see retracements through London. Considering the bullish momentum here on the 5-minute chart, I know that doesn't mean everything, but there looks to be some dynamic change here. We got lower lows and lower highs on this 50-minute chart, clearly, with the exception maybe of this part, but otherwise down momentum. Now we're challenging this top. I would still be a bit cautious and wait on the QE. Wait for a new setup. We have divergence between these bottoms too, so we need price probably to make some retracement, just like the pound dollar, for instance, too. Look back to the pivot point maybe, and then look for candlestick patterns at that point. Yeah, dollar CAD is something I was thinking about trading yesterday, but eventually didn't do because it just took too long, and it was somewhere in here, and I'm glad I didn't. Eventually I can see it did break. I didn't look at the CAD this morning, but it did break, but it took a while. It actually broke through Asian session. Interesting enough, the dollar CAD moved quite a lot in the Asian session relatively for its style, and but the break didn't happen in New York, so I'm happy that I skipped this breakout here. It did happen in Asian session, and we got a good run up, but here too the same story. It's a bit unfortunate, but the Asian session moved quite a lot relatively for its average. And those that watched the webinar volatility yesterday know about that. So it's a bit surprising, but sometimes it happens, and that does put the London session a bit in difficulties in the sense that we might get a bit of follow through still, but how much is left? Not worth the risk, in my opinion. We have shooting stars here 2 times in a row. So despite the bullish moving averages here, it actually we're seeing rejection signs. Is that worth trading those rejection signs? Well, I guess maybe, but not in my opinion. I would like to see rejection signs at key levels, like pivot points, for instance, like the weekly, monthly, daily. Those are all below it. So it could still pop up to the R3, for instance, right? We don't know. It could. So in that regard, I'm not interested in both up and downside. Could be overextended. It might not be. Is it worth trading to the upside? Not for a few pips, in my opinion. Is it worth trading to the downside? No, because we can still make those few pips up. It's not at a key resistance. So therefore, both up and downside don't seem interesting. Alrighty. Got a question here from Dilip. So just bear with me a minute, okay? It's an important question. I want to know, Deepak is saying, which time frame is better for day trading? I'm mainly focusing on scalping and daily target 10 to max 15 pips. Is it reasonable? Is it really possible to make daily such pips? I think 10 to 15 is on the small side for a target. I know that scalpers do that. I wouldn't consider myself a scalper, so I would not know if that is, if that is a reasonable expectation. I know that Nanette is talking about 10 to 25 pips, so maybe it is. I would have to ask him more specifically because I'm not a scalper, so I would not be the best one to answer that question. I personally have a bit different trading style, although when I do trade lower time frames, I try to at least stay in the market as long as I can, as long as it's going my way, and if it doesn't go my way, I exit. So I try to let my winners run basically and cut my losses short. Now many traders talk about that, but it's very difficult to implement, or they often don't tell you how to do that, right? It's just a phrase, and it's difficult. What is the practical term for that? Well, what I use often is time factor. If it takes too long to develop, I use often my own, rough guidance of 3 to 6 candles. If it doesn't really move my way by then, I'm quick to cut my loss short. If the market moves my way that way, then I tend to use trailing stops. Right? By using trailing stops, I allow some space for the market still to continue. And if it really drops a lot, like for instance Kiwi yesterday, if you're aiming for 10 to 15 pips, and you have entry here, then you exit about here. Well, you can see there was a lot more left potentially for that move, and an extra 15 could do could make a big difference in the long run. So but that's my personal view. But it doesn't mean that targeting 10 to 15 is bad. It could be very good. It's just that I don't trade that way, so it would be difficult for me to comment on it. Besides, explain the way I do it. So I hope that makes sense. So what I do is I try to let my winners run a bit longer, and those winners sometimes reach 3 to 1, like the AudioUSD yesterday, or this Kiwi went for a 1.5, 2 to 1, I think, something like that, or sometimes even get a bit higher if I'm lucky, 4 to 1, 5 to 1 exceptions. Sometimes definitely. So those are good for the equity curve, not always, but that's how I trade. So dollar yen. Yeah, I was thinking about the dollar yen too yesterday. Decided not to do it. Saw this shooting star upon the break here and decided to skip it personally. However, you can see the price eventually did continue up. Took a bit of time, especially here with the Harami, but during Asian session here too, followed through as expected, close to 103. Bullish moving averages. Not much pace probably though, in my opinion, right? Because 103 is key level. We got daily and weekly R3s here. So wouldn't expect much more than that. 102.90, pretty close to that. So if we take a breakout, for instance, what do we have left? Only about 15 pips. So not worth the trouble considering the risk at the moment, which would be a bit more than 15. Bearish hourly candles at the moment as well, showing a bit of retrace here. So no, it's nothing that really, unfortunately, nothing that really is interesting for me either. Euro yen. Wait, pound yen first. Adrian is asking about a long, I think. No, oh no, sorry. What do you think of GJ? Is the question. So yeah, it lost its bullish momentum here. Moving average here is down. This one is up, so it's a mix. Doesn't mean though that we couldn't see any good setup at a pivot point, for instance, at a bouncing spot. This monthly pivot at the L5, if price were to get that low, could be an interesting bounce spot. We have a daily pivot right here. That could be already it. We're looking for 1 hour price action candlestick patterns. So in that regard, the daily or the monthly are options. So let's see how which one gets a bounce. But let's see. Yeah, this has gone pretty sideways for a day or so. Yeah, we could see a bounce, but it all depends if we see the price action, if we see candlestick patterns from an intraday perspective. Adrian is saying that we're at a big downtrend line. That's definitely so. If you look at the bigger picture, indeed. Wait, let me refresh the template here quickly. There are, of course, higher resistances on the weekly, definitely, which is showing a bit of a triangle, in fact, definitely. And depending on how you draw the triangle, we are still above the moving averages on the weekly as well. If you look at the weekly chart, you can see indeed price above that weekly moving averages already since September 2012, and we've remained above it. So in that regard, it's going to be interesting to see what happens. Price has more or less gone sideways for the last 3 months, just like all yen pairs. A lot of loss of volatility at the moment. And you can see that the ups and downs are getting slower and slower, in fact. And the range is getting a bit tighter in its squeeze. Let's see, there could be, maybe Adrian is talking about a different trend line though. I'm not sure which one. Maybe this one like that. In any case, not sure which one, but there is a resistance, a horizontal resistance coming in at this level. That could be a reason to be careful for upside as well. So there could be resistance. We had a lot of a big up move as well. It's like a V-valley here. Down, up. This could be a topping action for more downside. So in that regard, we could maybe even expect a break below daily pivot, a hook back to the daily, and waiting for a rejection bar at the daily for more downside is another thing that could happen. I would like to see price push through this daily though before anticipating that. I would rather see if price can break through it and then hook back. If it doesn't hook back, this could still be a bouncing spot. Even though this is a resistance spot, this could still be a bouncing spot. So for me to know that it isn't a bouncing spot, I need to see price below it and hook back to it. Then I know it's a resistance again. So that resistance, that downside could go back to the monthly, for instance, and maybe follow through to the weekly. But that will probably take some time before it gets there. It wouldn't happen necessarily today, I would say, although you never know. With the pound yen, it is a big mover, according to our volatility statistics of yesterday. And the S3 of the daily is close to the weekly, so who knows? Maybe it could be that big of a fall. But that depends. The dollar yen probably will have to, I would say, it has reached a pretty high level. It was about the near the target that I had in mind, 102.90. It hit 102.80. Let's see if the dollar yen upside is indeed over. Euro yen, I guess, would be the same story. It doesn't have any resistance though, like the pound yen. It does have a shooting star on the 4-hour chart, Same story, uptrend, but overextended, I would say. Therefore, not too interested in both sides. It's a bit, it's a recurring story, isn't it, at the moment? Let's see, odd yen. Yesterday I was looking for actually, where was it? I was looking for a bounce off of the pivot, the monthly pivot. However, price didn't get there. It didn't quite touch it. So I didn't take this one either. I did take the pound odd, which will be the next currency we discuss. I was hoping for a bounce off that monthly pivot. In fact, that didn't happen. And that is moving nicely to the upside, so that would have been good. Certainly big uptrend here on this hourly, but recent price action has gone sideways, which means that the 15, despite the hourly aligned, most likely will not be aligned. Oh, it is. We do have a flat 21, but we have an upward 34. So that's something that could be interesting if price is able to start to make some upside momentum here. We need this 21 EMA to be aligned to the upside again. On the 15, then we would have 1 hour and 15 both aligned. We do see a lot of alignment. We just see a lot of movement as well prior to it. The 15, the odd yen is a bit different because it had a pretty big consolidation, so it could be ready for continuation of that. But at the moment, price is not confirming it. We needed to shift this up to the upside. Pound odd, let's see. There was actually major confluence of a weekly, a monthly, and a daily pivot right at that level. Plus we had a harami, a pin bar, and we had a candle, the hammer here, after this turnaround. So I took it basically upon this hammer here, this trade. And we did get some upside, but I was quick to get out when it didn't go my way anymore. On the 50-minute chart, basically, I already wanted to see price move fast because I realized that this could still be a correction, obviously, for more downside. So when price started to show these wicks on the 15, I got out for about plus 0.4 units, 0.35, I think it was, units of reward versus risk. So not a lot, but still some profit. Not as good as the Kiwi, but a bit, at least a bit something. So between here and here, basically. And after that, it didn't really go anywhere. It went down, in fact, so it's good. It was just based upon the support, the rejection off the levels here. The monthly, weekly, and daily pivots seemed like a strong reaction. We saw a lot of price action at that, so it seemed like we could get a bounce. That's what I was trading. Now, of course, we never know how far that bounce goes. That's why we have to be always a bit defensive with those things, right, to a certain degree. So that was the pound odd. Just like the odd USD gave a good trade, but didn't go very far. The odd USD did go a bit further though. Now, what is happening now though? We have the monthly and weekly daily now above us with pretty good 1 hour moving averages to the downside. So pity we have the pound news event, in fact. Yeah, it could be it could be still a good trade, actually, upon the break of this bottom. But I would exit prior to the news event, probably. The problem is with a news event like that, the chances of a real follow-through are smaller. You might get a small break and then price could go right back up in this level. That's one of the things I would therefore be careful of. like that until the news event. So that would be the reason for me to skip it personally. In theory, though, if it were not for the news event, it would have everything aligned with the hourly down, 15-minute down, and all the pivots above us. So basically, we could expect a decent breakout to the downside in theory. But Euro odd, that's what, at least what the strategy is looking for. The Euro odd, I shorted it upon the engulfing twin here at the pivot, but I didn't have the patience to. On one account, I am still in it. The other account, I didn't have patience, and I actually clicked it out for a couple of pips loss. The other one I'm still in, and now I'm at break even. But the whole idea was engulfing twins at the monthly pivot point here, which is working fine. We had good follow through, and if you look at price action, we can still see lower lows, lower highs, a big wick here at the daily pivot. So that looks good. Now that could be a signal itself right at the daily pivot, but we have a weekly pivot right below it. So that's why it would not be of interest to me at the moment, because the price is still too tight between these two pivots. Moving averages on the hourly are down though, 15.2. So the same story here, but the Euro odd as the pound odd, in fact. So the Euro odd could be better than the pound odd because, well, it has some news events too, but not as big as the pound, I believe. Isn't it? Let's check. Yeah. Well, officially it's medium. Well, not officially, but according to our website here. So yeah, so in that regard, you know, it could make sense, but we have that weekly pivot in front of it, so that makes it not tradable in my opinion. Everything is aligned to the downside in the momentum and moving averages, but if a weekly pivot is so close by, I don't think it makes sense. So I'm at that, you know, this was a swing trade for me. I'm in that from that engulfing hourly twin once again, and I'm having to break even above this top basically. But right here, to add a trade or take a new trade doesn't make sense, I think, with these pivot points above and below so close by. Let's see, maybe the EuroCAD could be different. Let's take a look. EuroCAD had a good run up. Anyone using this strategy yesterday had a good breakout here, and that was a good, yeah, depending on where you took it exactly, but it could have been a good 20, 30 pips here. So maybe some of you saw that trade too. That was a good one on the EuroCAD yesterday. We can keep an eye on this one. I mean, it faces the same objections like all the others in the sense that there's divergence and news events and, well, the Euro not so much, but news events, I mean divergence, and the dollar CAD is showing struggles. So that would not have its positive effect on the Euro CAD either. But everything is very bullishly aligned, although the only thing is all these trades look better actually to take yesterday. Not so much now at the moment, but I would say let's keep an eye on the EuroCAD still. Maybe it makes sense. Let's see, we have the monthly pivot point about the projection high here at 104.90-ish, 104.90.20. The break of this 5-minute top is 148.94, which gives about 26 pips. And the risk is about 26 at the moment. I don't know. It doesn't seem that great, but we can keep an eye on it. Maybe it sets itself up a bit better. Pound CAD is struggling with that monthly pivot and not going anywhere because of that. Euro New Zealand in an uptrend, but the polls are losing control right now. Same for the pound New Zealand. Dollars Swissie, yeah, not so aligned as that. Just barely got the alignment here on the hourly. So that could be interesting to the upside. We have the pivot points downwards. We are above H3. So that looks interesting. Probably the only one that actually has space and is lined up, I would say. A couple of dojis in a row. Yeah, so the dollar Swissie seems like the only one that has a potential breakout, but not that it moves a lot, as you can see from these candles. But technically speaking, would have a decent setup, I think, for upside. All in all, though, it looks pretty choppy, so I'm not a big fan of the Swissie in general at the moment due to that particular formation here. Something we can keep an eye on maybe throughout the session, but because of the lack of movement on the dollar Swiss, still have a bit of doubts because of that. But technically speaking, the only one that would have roughly everything aligned. Not much space though because of the lack of movement of the dollar Swiss. But yeah, yesterday afternoon things were looking a bit better in my opinion. The setups there, and we had follow through of those setups in the New York session during the Asian session today, and that's why I think everything is not really matched up suitably for either momentum with the momentum setup or even a bounce off a major level like pivot points. Brian is saying, let's see, that the EMA looks easy with the EMA. Yeah, it does. I think it definitely helps with regard to the visual tool. Brian is also saying if it's a good idea to sell when it turns red and buy when it turns green. It probably wouldn't do too bad. In fact, indeed, because it's a very useful tool and indicator. Now, obviously, there's going to be moments that it doesn't work all too good, so you have to cut your losses short then if it doesn't get any follow through, especially if you have some whipsaw maybe where it turns red or green, not like a few times in a row. That would not be good, obviously, for such a setup. But you see that it doesn't really happen too often. We have it a bit here, but it's mixed. It's not both red. We have here both red, but price goes the opposite way. So obviously you're going to have some drawdowns, tough times. With using filters, it will help a bit. But you can see that indicator itself is already worth a lot, I think, just when knowing about that. Now, when you throw in some other things like for instance filters, pivot points, and candlesticks, it just makes it even more reliable, I think. But that's the advantage of using moving averages and trail stops, because you can see, of course you would have to swing trade this, but if you are, a lot of potential to stay in for a good run. Same to the downside. Although you have some retracements, obviously that's why you need to have a balance with trail stopping it but not too loose. Otherwise, it would be a pity to give too much profit in a retracement like that away. Yeah, but I agree. This itself is already a very good base, and if you just add a few things, then it becomes even better. Yeah, so not not something I would say I'm very interested in right here, right now. Like yesterday, I could see already some good developments coming up, but for that day, I'm lacking that vision right here today, right now. Maybe you see it differently, but based on what I look at, with the tools I look at, I just don't see it at the moment of anything of particular interest, except the pound dollar. Maybe if it were to hook back to the daily, actually the pound dollar is continuing lower, interesting enough. One more follow through. Wow, that is really a far move down, but I think that this one could be the last one. Let's see. Especially with the pound news. Now, maybe you see it differently. So which pair do you have in mind? Is there something that you would like to discuss still, maybe? Yesterday, we discussed volatility and how you can use time factor to have an idea if there's going to be a lot of volatility, or if there's just quietness for more trend continuation. That's quite useful when trading intraday as well, as explained in the webinar. So if you haven't watched it, take a look at the recording maybe. Any questions otherwise? I don't see anyone mentioning any pairs, so probably you don't see anything particular either. But maybe any questions or comments? In general, I do think that the pound dollar has potential on a hook back, as I said, but right here, right now, I don't think it's worth it. Pound CAD might get follow through too if it breaks this trend line, which it actually is doing. We'll have to see if we can really push through this trend line. It's a bit too early to tell, I think. Zealand yen did have a good break of this trend line yesterday, and a hook back. Let's see. It actually has the weekly and daily pivot point now above it. That could be interesting. Yeah, break below this L3 could be definitely something worth taking a look at. One of the better ones here, we had a shooting star at the weekly pivot. That was a nice one. The price is not too far actually from that level still, but it is moving quite choppily after that, so I would rather wait for the break personally. Let's see what else. The pound Swiss, yeah, we can take a look at that. Pound Swiss looks like it broke through support here on the daily line, or maybe a 4-hour line. A lot of momentum to the downside here, followed by a correction. This looks actually pretty good for downside. I like it. Looks like it's breaking through, so I would see if the pound can follow through on the downside. The pound Swiss seems like it has a good space to follow along with the pound dollar, because look at that. I would only really focus on the day S2 and the L5, and there's still a lot of space to the downside here. Maybe the weekly S1 is something to keep an eye on, but there is enough space here. So yeah, if the pound news is over and either gets a rejection at the pivots, or otherwise maybe a small dip followed by a pullback, could be interesting for shorts. But with the pound news, it could be difficult to trade it actually. But if you don't mind holding it throughout the news, technically it would be aligned to the downside, but I'd rather wait for the news personally. XAU, wait, what happened with this one? Let's put the template on. There it is, XAU USD. Consolidation on the 4-hour chart, prices is going sideways. Yesterday was a Harami or Doji. So the key level is going to be yesterday's high. If we close above it today, that could signal some retracement and bullish bounce to the upside. With yesterday being a Harami and Doji, looks like there's indecision at the moment. So, you know, there's a chance we can rebound to the upside because of that. So, is that worth trading? I don't know, but yeah, in my opinion, I don't trade XAUUSD all too often. So, that retracement could, for instance, go back to last week's high. Yeah, so I would say at the moment it looks like a decent chance of retracement up to the weekly and monthly pivot point, which should be resistance. However, technically speaking, the doji really is broken, and the downside is broken after this doji has a close above it, I would say. Either 4-hour or daily maybe. And then there's a decent chance of getting a bit of retracement to retrace this weekly downside, probably then for more downside. So something like that would seem the path of least resistance, I would think, at the moment. Let's see, this is gold 1 hour. It's also going sideways. The bear is still in control on this daily chart, as we can see. A lot of down momentum still on the daily and the weekly, just like gold, gold indeed. And but the only thing is we're right at that support line here. So we'll have to see how price reacts. We've already had one here, bounce, one here, bounce, but also price is making lower lows, lower highs. So it is looking like a potential descending wedge. That's quite interesting because if it is a descending wedge, it could maybe make one more fall, and maybe 15 could be the bouncing spot now. Very bearish, obviously, after this break here, especially what I expected indeed. That happened pretty fast, and we've had a consolidation, which is looking like a descending wedge, but we have to keep an eye on that top line too, because it could also be, if we break that line, that we move to the upside upon that break. So interesting spot. Well, folks, that wraps it up from my side. That's about all I have to share with you, in fact, today. Let's see. Dollar Swiss doesn't seem to be getting that follow through, indeed, as I was a bit skeptical. It had everything set up, but didn't get followed through. Otherwise, don't see much that is ready for me to trade, at least. If the pound dollar maybe makes a hook back or something, that could be an idea. Otherwise, I would need to see a bit more retracements on most of these pairs before I really get interested. So now, of course, the New York session could be totally different. Maybe in the next few hours we see something shape up, price moves to pivot points or some support or resistance, and we see some candlestick patterns there, or who knows, maybe we even get momentum follow through. But at the moment, I'm just don't see as many interesting opportunities as yesterday, and would be a bit cautious with those follow through momentums until a retracement is made. So I'll be keeping an eye on the market the next few hours, but I wouldn't expect anything for myself, at least sometime soon. Maybe more at the or at the beginning or just before New York. Maybe things could look a bit differently. So make sure, by the way, to take a look at Nena's webinar tonight. I'm not sure what the topic is. Let me take a look, and then we'll wrap it up for today, and then we go to education and webinars. You can find that at admiralmarkets.com, of course, as always, and you can see then that Nana is talking about how to turn scalps into intraday trades. So that could be an interesting topic, I would say, to take a look at. Thanks all for joining, and see y'all soon. Cheers.